Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have you back in here. I hope you had some fabulous lunch. The chicken was excellent. That's what I had. It was brand new. It's time to start looking into the future. And it would be great if our next guest could actually tell us who is going to win the next election. That would be awesome. It was great to have Greg Hunt here this morning. I always get nervous when government ministers make announcements because I thought it might have been another retirement. But no, that was good that that he's staying on anyway. I'd also like to know if Labor get in, if they're going to grandfather any capital gains tax discounts. So if you could let me know that, that'd be really great. Our next session is sponsored by PDL, and to introduce this session, the Alan Russell Oration, please welcome Paula Kwan from PDL. She's the Director for South Australia and Northern Territory to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. Along with the Guild and the PSA, PDL is proud to be able to support this trailblazing session. The oration pays tribute to Alan Russell, OBE, a pharmacist who was arguably ahead of his time, a visionary who made tremendous contribution to both community and official pharmacy. I'll just take a moment of your time to touch on a few of the important aspects of Alan's long career in pharmacy. Alan qualified as a pharmacist in 1946 at the age of 19. 2 years later, he was elected to the Council of Pharmacy Society of South Australia. Not long after that, he became its president. In 1948, he opened his own pharmacy, a sole proprietor at the age of 21. In 1951, he was elected the Guild official on the SA Branch Committee, becoming its president in 1959. Alan was renowned for his commercial and business acumen, and probably the most outstanding example of this was his role in establishing Guild Insurance. Alan was elected the foundation chair in 1963, serving the board for 25 years. Alan became the national president of the Pharmacy Guild in 1971, and he stayed in this position for 11 years. And while serving on the Guild's National Council, Alan became the director and then deputy chair for PDL, serving for over 24 years. His many other achievements included the establishment of the Australian Institute of Pharmacy Management, now the Australian College of Pharmacy, in 1971. He was also internationally active, and through his appointment to the prestigious International Pharmacy body, the FIP, serving on FIP Council for 8 years. And through that office, he did a great deal to promote the Australian system of pharmacy overseas, and in 1992 was presented with the highest award, the Andre Baudet Award, the first Australian to be so honoured. So the Alan Russell Oration stands for a mark of recognition of Alan's lifetime passion for pharmacy and in gratitude for his outstanding contribution to the profession. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to introduce Shara. She's a technologist, futurist, and a speaker. She's recognised as one of the world's top futurists. And she's also the founder and CEO of Market Clarity, an award-winning technology analyst firm. And you might have seen her on Q&A, The Project, and a number of other shows around the place if you still watch free-to-air television. How good is Netflix? Seriously, it changed my life. Shara helps her clients understand new product and service opportunities as well as threats that are being underpinned by emerging technologies. She's passionate about helping organisations think outside the box of what's available today and to imagine the world in 5 to 10 years. Please help me welcome Shara.
Thank you so much, Michael, and good afternoon, everyone. And sorry, no political predictions from me today, but I have a lot of exciting information to share about the future of healthcare. And wow, are we living in exciting times? We've got artificial intelligence, work with brain-machine interfaces, genetic sequencing, you name it, it's starting to happen, and it's going to impact the health of everybody, every single person in this room, and all of your businesses too. Let's start with something that's in the here and now, wearables. Today's wearables measure things like your blood pressure, your heartbeat, how well you're sleeping or not, as the case may be. But tomorrow, they're going to get even more sensitive. The pictures that I'm showing you here are experiments from UC Berkeley. It's a flexible wrist pad that is capable of measuring the chemicals in your sweat, picking out things like potassium and lactose, or drugs that are in your system, whether legal or illegal. Wearables represent an amazing opportunity to understand the things that are happening inside of our own bodies in real time. And from a pharmacy perspective, they also represent two completely new opportunities to you. One is on a retail perspective, offering wearables, whether it's today's wearables or the sort of future wearables that I'm showing here or even built into clothes. And secondly, from a service perspective, because as people start to gather more and more and more physiological data about themselves, and then they have apps that they're using to measure what they eat and how much they're sleeping, they're going to need help from professionals in putting all of this together into a meaningful format. And that's a service that may very well be provided at a pharmacy. So just out of curiosity, how many of you are selling wearables in your pharmacy today? I think I'm seeing only a couple of hands. This is an opportunity for you, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's going to get even more interesting as we move further out into the future. There's a new kind of wearable that's made out of stretchable electronics. Now, normally, if you think about silicon, like a chip in your computer, if you bend it, it snaps and it breaks. But there's a company called MC10 and an inventor who designed a way of building silicon in wave-like patterns so that they're bendable and flexible. And that means that they can be used like Band-Aids and put almost anywhere on your body. This particular device comes from his company, MC10, and it's called BioStamp RC. And it has kinematics, it has accelerometers, it has ECG measurements. It's waterproof for a small amount of time. It has Bluetooth capabilities so that it sends information to somebody's phone and perhaps from there onto their carers or their doctors. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Already there are commercial devices, aside from research devices like this, that use the same technology. At CES in 2016, going back a few years ago, there were already Band-Aids that had wearable, flexible sensors built in. MC10 did a JV with L'Oreal, and they came up with a UV patch that changes colors when you've had too much sun exposure. Again, tip of the iceberg, and the kinds of products that you might want to think about stocking in your pharmacies, but also being able to help interpret the data that comes from this information. This device is an on-the-spot rapid diagnostic test for HIV detection, and it was designed right here in Australia in the inner west of Sydney from a company called Otama. And what it is, it's an all-in-one device, and literally, you just put your finger in, it takes the blood sample, and it gives you the results straight away. It's designed for countries where there are very few lab technicians, so third world countries where there's a lot of HIV, or it could be used for perhaps other diseases as well, but giving real-time indicators as to what's happening in a person's body. Now, when it comes to infectious diseases like HIV, this is probably not the sort of thing that you'd stock on your shelf and just sell off to people, even though they might want to buy it. But it might be the sort of test that you offer, just like you offer flu shots, where people can find out in real time, do I have a particular ailment or do I not? Another really interesting innovation has recently come out of Cornell University, and it uses RFID tags, the kinds of things that you see on all kinds of consumer goods in shops already, to measure your heart rate, your breathing, and other physiological data without requiring any skin contact. And it's just as accurate as putting a blood cloth around your arm to measure your blood pulse. It's amazing. And not only that, but it has the capability through its control box of monitoring 200 of these RFID tags simultaneously. So imagine that you're in a hospital situation or a clinic situation, and literally you've got a bunch of patients sitting in a waiting room, and you give them one of these little RFID sticks to just stick in their shirt pocket while they're waiting, and you can monitor everyone that's waiting and prioritize people who are starting to have something that is signaling a distressing situation. Eventually, this kind of technology is going to be woven into clothing or perhaps sold separately to people who have things like heart conditions, and they will be able to get information directly from these RFID tags onto their smartphones and maybe send it on to physicians. Again, another potential retail opportunity for you. How many of you have heard of augmented reality? Lots of hands. How many of you have had a chance to use augmented reality glasses? Anybody? Yeah, quite a few. It's fun. With augmented reality, what I'm talking about is superimposing the digital world image on top of our field of vision of the real world. So I can still look around and see everybody, but I'm seeing digital information as well. There are so many applications in the medical world, it is just outstanding. One that I got to personally play with was an augmented reality anatomy model designed by Case Western Reserve University in the United States. And as I was playing with this model, I was doing it with 3 other people at the same time, and through our gestures, we were able to turn the model around and upside down, peel off layers of skin, look deep inside somebody's heart, and do all sorts of interesting things. Now, there are a lot of implications to this kind of technology. One, can you imagine that you're sitting in a doctor's office and he or she has told you about a medical condition that you have, and you're trying to visualize exactly what the doctor is telling you? Well, with this kind of technology, the 2 of you could literally be in a shared immersive augmented reality simulation of what's happening inside of your body, and the doctor can show you what's going on, and you can look at it and see it and understand it much better than you could just through plain words or a 2-dimensional diagram or the kind of skeleton that they might have in a medical office. But it has a lot of other implications for the medical profession, too. At Case Western, they're looking to completely replace their anatomy lab with augmented reality for training. That's pretty astounding. There are lots of other uses, like pre-surgical planning, or if you want to do something like cosmetic surgery and getting a view of what you might look like with different kinds of operations. You know, there's so many uses. The list is just endless. A related technology is virtual reality. Now, unlike AR, with virtual reality, you are completely immersed into a digital world. So you wouldn't want to be walking around, unaided in a place where you might fall off a stage because you've got this big headset on. But where it gets really interesting in the medical world is with a project that's down in Brazil called the Walk Again Project. And it's a collaboration of researchers from all around the world that are using virtual reality, robotic exoskeletons, and brain-machine interfaces to help people who've been paralyzed walk again. So far, they've had 8 patients go through this procedure. All of them had lost complete feeling from the waist down, but they still had their spinal cord intact, so there were still some nerve connections that could be reestablished. And what they did as the first step was they used an Oculus Rift virtual reality headset and had 8 of these people basically control characters in virtual reality, just using their mind and, gestures with their hands. And what the researchers found was that by controlling these virtual reality characters, it started to reinitiate neural patterns in their brain and in their nerve cells that had been dormant for many, many years. The next step that they did was put these same volunteers into an exoskeleton harness with a brain-machine interface, these little skull cap things, and put them on a treadmill and started to get them to move their muscles through the exoskeleton, walking around again. And once again, what the researchers found was that by moving around, new neural patterns were starting to become established. Then, as the third step, they combined it all together. So they're in this robot exoskeleton. They've got the brain-machine interface on. They've got the virtual reality mask on. They're on the treadmill, and they're controlling characters with their thoughts. Well, that stimulated enough nerve regeneration that all 8 of the participants regained feeling below the waist. They regained control of their bladder and bowels. And one woman even decided to have a baby afterwards. It's really quite an extraordinary use of cutting-edge technologies meshed together in new and innovative ways. Now, virtual reality has many applications, and it may just well be useful in your retail store. One of the applications for VR is actually doing store mock-ups and walkthroughs. So can you imagine you want to take a whole new section of sensors or new gadgets into your store and you're not quite sure where to place them? What if you mock it up in virtual reality and have customer test groups walk through different scenarios? It's only going to cost you a few bucks to design it digitally as opposed to the real world, and you can put a lot more people through it, and there's a lot more that you can do with this kind of technology. I've talked about sensors before. Well, sensors are getting smaller and smaller. This one is just a little bit larger than the size of a pinhead, and it's called the Proteus pill sensor. And it's designed to be embedded in medication. Have any of you heard of the Proteus pill before? Okay, well, this is something that you're going to need to pay attention to because it's already FDA approved in a particular medicine from Otsuka called Abilify. It's an antipsychotic medicine. So what happens is this little sensor is embedded in the pill. You take the pill like you would any other medicine. As it gets to your digestive fluids in your stomach, that activates the sensor. The sensor then communicates with a patch that you have on your arm, and from there, it's got Bluetooth and it goes to your smartphone, and it's literally monitoring what's happening physiologically inside of your body and how often you're taking these pills. And with permission, it can send that information on to a carer or to your doctor or to others. Now, one of the biggest issues there is with taking medication is that we don't know exactly when people are taking medicine, whether they're taking it as prescribed, maybe they're forgetting to take the medicine. You just don't know. But with little sensors embedded inside, suddenly, when a patient comes in and says, well, this medicine isn't helping me, you've got a record of how often they've taken it and whether it's actually not working for them or they're just forgetting to take the medicine. I think we're going to see a lot more medications that get approval to have this kind of little chip embedded inside of them, and it's something that pharmacists will very much need to be aware of. There's another new innovation on the horizon, and this is still in clinical trials. It's from a company called Ronnie Therapeutics, and it's called the Ronnie pill. And it's designed to eliminate the need to inject insulin in people who have diabetic conditions. And what it is a pill that goes all the way through your digestive tract, and then once it gets to your intestine, then it inflates like a balloon, and these little sugar spikes come out and literally give you a hit of insulin directly through sugar in your intestine where you don't have any pain receptors, and then everything flushes right out through your system. And it doesn't hurt. How amazing is that? How many people could something like that benefit? And it's designed for these large molecules that would otherwise be destroyed in the stomach acids and other areas of your body. So you can expect to see something like this on the horizon very soon. 3D printing has so many amazing medical applications. I could talk about it for a long time, but let me just give you a couple of examples. One is printing with stem cells. That's right, living stem cells. Another is literally printing out a replacement ear, which may be made up partially of your own stem cells. And this particular picture is a bionic ear that gives you a range of hearing that goes beyond normal human hearing. So you're not just getting a replacement ear that happens to match exactly the ear that you might have lost, you're getting better hearing in the process. Researchers are already using 3D printing with biomaterials to print out blood vessels and cartilage and skin. They're also using it for people who've been in horrific accidents and have a crushed skull. So what they do in that instance is they take an MRI image or a CT scan or both and create a replica skull, and then they use another 3D printer. Let's say you have a broken jaw, and they'll print out a titanium jaw that will be used to be surgically implanted, but they'll test it on the plastic 3D model first to make sure that it fits and it works exactly perfectly with your broken anatomy before they do the surgery. And then once the surgery is complete, you know that you actually have something that is going to look right and fit right and be fit for use. Another interesting aspect of 3D printing is this little printer that I'm showing down on the bottom, and there are a lot of companies that are getting into this. This one is from a company that was originally called BioBots, and it changed its name recently to Allevi. It cost about $10,000, but it's used for research labs, and what they're doing is they're using all kinds of living ink, if you like, to print out different kinds of tissue for drug testing. And it's speeding up the whole drug testing process because you can very cheaply and easily print out samples, test things, discard them, go on to the next. Ultimately, the goal, though, and it may be 10 years or more, it may be 20 years, is to be able to have 3D printers like this and print out or biofabricate complete organs. Imagine if you need a kidney transplant, no longer waiting for a donor list, you use your own stem cells and your own DNA and you 3D print it and you get that operation straight away. What a game changer, huh? 3D printing is also being used in some very, very inventive ways in the third world. These pictures are from Makerere University in Uganda. And in many third world countries, they've got some issues that we don't have here, in that they've got a lot of microscopes that are able to analyze pathogens, but they don't have enough lab technicians to be able to actually do the work. So what they've done is they've taken smartphones, which increasingly have artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities built into them. Then they're custom designing 3D printed interfaces to hook up the smartphone with the microscope and doing real-time analysis of all kinds of different pathogens based on samples like blood or spit or stool or something else. And it's the AI in the smartphone that's able to do the diagnostic work, and just a normal doctor who's actually operating it rather than a specialist pathologist. It's speeding up the time to a cure and to catching diseases before they have an epidemic or an outbreak. 3D printing is going to absolutely shake up the pharmaceutical industry. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to happen, but it will, because what's already been invented is a 3D printer that is able to print out molecular level drugs. So can you imagine, instead of having pharmaceutical companies send you boxes with pre-encapsulated pills, what they're sending you is a CAD file with 3D printing instructions for how to print a medicine. The impact of this is going to be very similar to what happened when Apple introduced iTunes, and it completely disrupted and changed the music industry. Now, there's probably going to be a time period between when we see this and the fact that we can already do it. It was actually invented in 2013 by a scientist at Glasgow University. But the hard part is the commercial model. You know, from a drug company perspective, they spend many millions of dollars developing new drugs. And if they're going to send files off to pharmacies around the world, they need ways of knowing that they're going to be compensated. But mark my words, it's going to be a matter of time before 3D printing becomes something that you do in the pharmacies, and it will be very personalized medicine. It won't be one-size-fits-all tablets like we have today. You'll be printing out tablets that are customized to a patient's medical condition, to their weight, to their genomics. And there will be good reasons for wanting to do it. But there are issues to be solved. Another really fascinating technology is this whole area of bioelectromagnetics, and that is basically using very, very low frequency magnetic pulses and applying them over the human body to effect real healing, anti-inflammatory, helping tissue regenerate, stopping pain, helping with things like osteoporosis. And what's fascinating about this is that it's a forbidden science. Work on this started with James Clerk Maxwell back in 1865. Nikola Tesla was playing around with this back in the 1800s as well. And it looked like it was going mainstream. And then suddenly in about 1910, it was just taken out of all the medical curricula, even though there was no real good reason for it. Now today, there's been a resurgence of these pulsed electromagnetic frequency devices, and there are a number of companies that are now making them. I became fascinated with this about 6 months ago and have read at least 50 peer-reviewed articles or abstracts in scientific journals, and I'll give you a couple of examples of how this is being used. One was from a journal called The Prostate, where they were looking at canines with enlarged prostates, which is something that also happens to human men. And over a 3-week period, they had dogs that were all owned and loved by real owners, different sizes and weights and breeds. And they used a pulsed electromagnetic field over the prostate 3 times a day for 3 weeks. In the course of 3 weeks, their enlarged prostates reduced on average by 57%. That's massive. In 2004, NASA did a study that was looking at osteoporosis and bone loss up in space, because that's a really big problem for astronauts. And what they found was that after testing a whole bunch of different devices, that not only could these devices help prevent bone loss and actually start to regain bone by using heat shock protein 70, opening up the channel to allow calcium uptake, but that if you use a nanosecond rise time, it was actually 4 times more effective than millimeter rise times in the magnetics. So I decided I wanted to see what this stuff is like for myself. So I bought this gadget that you're seeing here called an EM pulsar, and decided to see, does it work, if you do something like get a bruise or sprain an ankle. And let me tell you, it actually does. I had a blood test that I did a couple of months ago where the lab tech missed. And normally I bruise really, really easy, and my arm would normally hurt for at least a week. I strapped this baby on, and in about 2 hours later, my arm wasn't hurting, and I had no black and blue mark whatsoever. This is the kind of gadget, and there are a lot of companies that make them, that you might consider taking into your pharmacies on a retail basis, because they actually can help eliminate inflammation, they can help reduce pain, they can get people off of opioids, and there's so much more. I wish I had more time to go into it, but you really should look into this because it's fascinating. Artificial intelligence is, in my opinion, the technology that's going to shake the world more than any other, and there are so many medical uses, it's just astounding. One of them is going to be in using AI to help diagnose diseases, because let's face it, there are so many clinical trials that happen all the time, and conference proceedings, and just so much information that no single person, no matter how well educated they are, even if they don't sleep, can possibly be on top of everything. And not only that, but AI is very, very good at going through masses and masses of data and analyzing patterns. It's already being successfully used in oncology to help oncologists go through really complex patient histories, as well as all kinds of clinical studies, and recommend the right kinds of treatment. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to using AI. We're going to see it in lots of places, including image detection and in something that's happening in the UK, which is really fascinating, which is natural language-based chatbots that are doing first-level clinical-grade triage by literally talking to patients. So this is a chatbot called Babylon, and it's being rolled out in conjunction with the UK National Health Service. So it's being done with the medical authorities over there. And if you have the application and you're talking to Babylon, you might say, I'm not feeling so good, I've got a tummy ache. And then Babylon will ask you in natural language a whole series of questions to help you drill down into what's really going on. And then from there, either recommend a potential treatment or going to see a doctor. And what's interesting is that when you compare Babylon's references to see a human to a real person's references to see a specialist, it's roughly the same percentage. Now, it's not foolproof. Nothing is foolproof, really. But I think that you're going to start seeing patients coming into your pharmacies in the very near future saying, well, my AI told me that I need XYZ treatment because I have blah, blah, blah. And you're going to want to be on top of these developments, and you may even want to consider having services that are built around this kind of service. AI is also being used to look at drug interactions. And this is a big problem. When you've got one drug, you've got a whole range of known side effects. When you put it together with 2 drugs, it starts to get more complex. But there are 5,000 drugs plus out there, and more every day, and at least 1,000 different possible reactions. When you start getting patients who are taking 5 or more drugs, the potential implications and reactions start to get huge. The number that I've seen is in the order of 125 billion different kinds of interactions. How many of you have patients that take 5 or more prescription drugs on a regular basis? Pretty much everybody, right? And the side effects are unknown because you're mixing all kinds of stuff together. Well, Stanford University has designed an experimental AI called Decagon that is being used to emulate what happens with side effects of all different combinations of drugs. Right now, it's limited to just what happens with 2 drugs, but obviously that's going to grow and grow in the future. Already, it correctly identified a previously unknown reaction between Lipitor and Norvasc that resulted in a muscle inflammation, and that wasn't on the books. So we can expect to see more and more from AI as well. So going into the future, are we going to be taking tech into our own bodies? And what is that going to mean for us? Well, one of the first places we'll probably take tech into our bodies is with smart contact lenses. And there's a lot of work going on in the ICT industry and the biotech industry to combine in a single contact lens, which when it comes to market in probably 7 years, things like augmented reality and facial recognition and all the apps that you have on smartphone, as well as things like auto-sensing, your eyesight so that you can get telephoto or ditch your reading glasses, or use the chemicals in your tear ducts to measure what's happening physiologically in your body, or possibly even deliver drugs into your body. But wow, it's going to get even more exciting as we start going into the world of nanotech and brain-machine interfaces. I'd like to show you this short little clip from UC Berkeley and what they're working on, which is now millimeter size, but is going to go down to nanometer size. And they're using ultrasound to control these little brain-machine interfaces that so far are being used to attach to rat nerve fibers and be able to pick up the electrical signals from rat nerves and be able to send it back to the scientists who are doing the experiments. Now, the genesis of this project comes from DARPA, Defense Research Agency in the United States, because what they want to ultimately do is have soldiers that have brain-machine interfaces that are able to control their physiology, to be able to do things like control pain in the battlefield, or even help with things like post-traumatic stress disorder. But this technology goes well beyond that. If you can imagine these brain-machine interfaces being nanometer size, so small that it would be hard to see even with a microscope, and literally floating about in various parts of your body, monitoring your organs in real time and providing real-time physiological data to your carers, or just taking care of problems in your body as they happen. It's extraordinary, and the work is happening now. So we're probably at least 10 years from this being a commercial product, but this is the stuff that's happening in research labs. And one of the new jobs that we're going to see in the future is a brain-machine interface specialist. And it may not impact you directly, but I guarantee you in 15 years' time, these are the kinds of professionals you'll be talking to on a regular basis. We're entering a new era of medicine, precision medicine. No more one size fits all. When you start looking at things like genetic engineering and nanotech and artificial intelligence and brain-machine interfaces, and even the data we're getting from wearables and next-generation wearables, and the fact that we have 3D printers that we can actually 3D custom print medicine, the game is going to change. We're going to be helping people on a very individualized basis, and in 20 years, we'll look back at the way we're treating patients and we'll think, oh my gosh, they were in the dark ages. You know, it's like sticking leeches on people. How could they not have had customized medicine? One of the things that is driving this is genomics, and that is analyzing the genetic sequences of us humans. It's predicted that by 2025, as part of the Human Genome Research Project and others, we will have analyzed somewhere between 100 million and 1 billion different genes. That's a lot of information, and once we have that information, we will be able to come up with extremely tailored medicines, likely printed with our own DNA or stem cells, to be able to help us out and keep us healthy. Another technology that is sitting right inside our own bodies is stem cells. And it's incredible. Like years ago, when you thought of stem cells, you thought of aborted fetuses. Not these days. These days, you would get stem cells from one of two places, either bone marrow, but more likely from adipose fat. Your extra little padding that you're carrying that some of us may not want to have, that may be your internal fountain of youth. This particular scientist, his name is Chris Duma, and he's a neuroscientist, and he's using stem cells to help people with Alzheimer's. He's got one patient, a guy by the name of Jack Sage, who's in his 80s, whose Alzheimer's was getting progressively worse. He drilled a hole into his skull and started doing stem cell injections directly into his skull. After 8 treatments, Jack's memory was improving. His hippocampus grew from the 5th percentile to the 48th percentile, and his cognitive scores have also improved, and he's remembering things that he had forgotten previously. In other words, still very early days, but reversing memory loss. Stem cells are still hit or miss, but it's one of these new technologies that's going to be a game changer. And last but not least is the genetic research into aging. And boy, is that exciting, because there are already researchers at Salk Institute who have done in vitro and in vivo research with mice and just in culture dishes with humans to be able to reverse aging. There was one living mouse in particular that had progeria, the rapid aging disease, and they managed to turn back the clock and make this particular mouse younger. But it gets even better than that. There's a physicist, Professor Yanir Bar-Yam, who believes that we will, within the next 10 to 20 years, find the genetic switch that turns aging on and off. And that when we do, an average lifespan will be between 400 and 800 years old. Can you imagine working until you're 400 years old? Can you imagine being married for 800 years? Can you imagine what this will do to the social fabric of our society? We are in such a fun and exciting time in healthcare, and as pharmacists and pharmacy owners, there are so many new opportunities on the horizon for you. Thank you so much for your time and attention this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shara. Shara's going to be around this afternoon. She's off to do an interview shortly, but then she's going to be around in the trade. So please track Shara down. I don't have time for questions now, Shara, but the guys, I'm sure, will track you down to find out what you would do if you had to be married for 800 years. Just to be clear, I would be very happy to be married for 800 years. I've been married for 19 now, and it's like it was just yesterday, and it's beautiful. So please, thank Shara, and she'll be around in the trade later on. How good. I think the interesting thing was the wearable thing, where most of us have a wearable on. I've got a wearable on. I have my Apple Watch on. But I thought it would be great with this sweat analysis thing. It would be great if your wearable could tell you what your blood alcohol level was. That would be excellent. We all have our own wellness story, and that is mine, trying to reduce that more often. We're gonna move into our next session very shortly, but before we do, we're just gonna have a quick 2 minutes to gather ourselves down here and prepare for the next panel. So we will see you back here in 2 minutes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.